A quiet trip to the bank turns into a nightmare when a millionaire loses control and kicks his pregnant wife in front of stunned customers. Cameras catch every second. He thinks he can spin it. He thinks he can silence her. He has no idea who he is dealing with, because her father is the one man who can turn a nation against him with truth alone. What follows is not a police case. It is a war of exposure, humiliation, and justice delivered through the power of millions watching. And believe me, the moment that final live stream hits the screen, you will not be ready for what happens. Before we dive in, tell us what time you are listening and where you are tuning in from. Drop a comment below. We would love to hear from you. The winter sun hung low over Denver that morning, spreading a pale light across the marble steps of Highstone National Bank. The glass doors reflected the moving crowd outside and the tall buildings that framed the financial district. Anna Wilson stood at the entrance and breathed in the icy air as she placed one hand on her stomach. Her baby shifted gently beneath her palm. She whispered to herself that everything would be fine. She only needed answers. She only needed clarity. She only needed to understand why her husband had secret accounts tucked away in a bank she had never heard him mention. Inside, the lobby glowed under rows of warm lights. The polished marble floor gleamed like a frozen lake. Older customers in wool coats waited patiently in line, while bank employees walked back and forth with careful, practiced smiles. Anna moved slowly, carrying the extra weight of her 6-month pregnancy with quiet determination. Her breath misted in the air every time the doors opened and closed behind her. She approached the reception desk and offered a polite smile. "I am here to ask about several accounts under the name Graham Blackwell," she said softly. The young teller, startled by her gentle tone and the obvious strain on her face, nodded and asked to see her identification. Anna handed it over with slightly trembling fingers. Her heart pounded. She had spent the entire night staring at the printouts she had found by accident on Graham's desk. Money transfers, hidden balances, a pattern of secrecy that made no sense for a married couple preparing for a baby. She had convinced herself that going to the bank directly was the only way to know the truth. She told herself she deserved honesty. She told herself her baby deserved it too. The teller typed a few lines into the computer and then stopped. He looked confused. He turned toward the inner offices as if searching for someone more experienced. Anna felt a ripple of anxiety move through her. Her breathing quickened. Before she could ask what the problem was, the heavy glass doors behind her swung open with a sudden force that startled everyone in the lobby. Footsteps echoed, loud, fast, angry. A voice cut through the quiet room. "Anna, what do you think you are doing here?" Anna froze. Her shoulders tightened. She recognized the voice immediately. Graham's tone carried a sharpness that pierced the air like a metal blade dragged across stone. People turned to look at the man striding across the lobby in an expensive navy suit. His expression was a mask of rage. His eyes were locked on her with frightening intensity. "I just needed to ask about the accounts," Anna managed to say. Her voice cracked. "I found some statements, and I wanted to understand." "You wanted to understand." Graham's laugh was harsh and cold. "You have embarrassed me. You have embarrassed yourself. You had no right to come here. The accounts are under your name," Anna said quietly. "We are married. I thought we could talk about it." Graham stepped closer, towering over her. His face tightened with fury. "Lower your voice. Everyone is watching." "I am not doing anything wrong," Anna whispered. Her eyes filled with tears. "I just want the truth." "You do not get the truth," Graham snapped. "You do not get anything without my permission." Anna tried to take a step back to protect her stomach, but Graham moved faster. The tension in the room thickened. Several customers stared. Some covered their mouths. Others froze in place. A man in his 70s whispered to his wife, who clutched her purse with both hands. Then it happened. Without hesitation and without shame, Graham lifted his leg and kicked Anna hard on her left side, just above her hip. The sound of impact echoed across the marble floor. A sharp cry escaped her throat. Her body folded inward, and she fell to her knees, arms wrapped around her stomach, gasping for breath as pain shot through her entire body. The lobby fell silent. Someone dropped a pen. Another person whispered, "Dear God." An older woman let out a horrified gasp and grabbed the arm of the man next to her. Two younger customers pulled out their phones, their hands shaking, already recording. Anna's vision blurred. The cold floor pressed against her palms. Her heart raced in frantic beats. She tried to breathe, but her chest tightened around the pain. She felt her baby move. A soft kick from inside, and terror flooded every part of her being. Graham stood over her with no hint of remorse. "Get up," he ordered. "Stop acting pathetic." Anna lifted her head. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She tried to speak, but her voice caught in her throat. She attempted to rise, but her legs trembled uncontrollably. Her arms felt weak. Her breath came in shallow bursts. And then the doors opened once more. A tall man with silver hair stepped through, carrying a small box of documents under his arm. His coat was dusted with snow. His boots echoed against the marble. His eyes fell immediately on the scene before him. The moment he recognized the woman on the floor, his entire body stiffened. "Anna?" he whispered. Charles Wilson dropped the box and rushed forward. He knelt beside his daughter, his hands trembling as he touched her shoulder and checked her breathing. "Sweetheart, look at me. Stay with me." Anna blinked slowly. "Dad?" she murmured. Her voice shook. "He kicked me." Charles turned his head toward Graham. His expression changed. The warmth in his eyes vanished. What remained was a coldness that froze the air around him. His jaw clenched. His hands curled into fists. Graham scoffed. "This is none of your concern. She is my daughter," Charles said. His voice was low and steady, the tone of a man who had carried authority his entire life. "And she is carrying my grandchild. Then you should teach her to respect her husband," Graham replied. "She made a scene. She deserves it." Charles rose slowly. The entire lobby felt the shift in his presence. He was no longer just a father. He was a man who had decided something irreversible. He leaned down, lifted Anna carefully into his arms, and held her close. She clutched his collar and cried softly into his coat. The bank employees cleared a path. The customers moved aside. Every camera in the room captured the moment. Charles looked straight into the nearest security camera with eyes that no longer held fear or hesitation. They held purpose. They held resolve. They held the silent promise of a man who would not forgive. "Today," he said quietly to Anna, "is only the beginning." He walked out of the bank, carrying his daughter, while Graham stood frozen behind them, unaware that his world had just begun to fall apart. The ambulance lights flashed red and white across the quiet parking lot as paramedics rushed Anna through the hospital doors. The cold Denver air vanished behind them, replaced by the sharp smell of antiseptic and the steady beeping of machines scattered along the hallway. Anna clung to consciousness, her breath caught between pain and fear. Her hands pressed against her stomach as if she could shield her baby from everything that had just happened. Inside the exam room, nurses moved with calm efficiency. One adjusted the monitors while another placed warm blankets over Anna's trembling body. A soft voice told her to take slow breaths. A hand tapped the ultrasound machine. A pair of gloves snapped into place. Anna heard it all as if from far away, drifting in and out of a haze where her baby's safety was the only thing she could truly sense. Charles Wilson followed close behind. His boots clicked sharply against the linoleum floor. His face, usually composed and steady, was tight with fear. He stood by the curtain for several seconds, gripping the edge with one hand as if he needed something to anchor him. The sight of his daughter lying there broke something inside him. He stepped closer and placed a shaking hand on her shoulder. "Dad," Anna whispered. Her voice was thin and fragile. "It hurts." "I know, sweetheart," he said softly. "I am here. Stay still. They will take care of you." His words were steady, but his eyes glistened with the kind of helplessness he had never felt before. A doctor in a white coat entered and introduced himself in a controlled tone. He examined the monitor, pressed lightly along Anna's ribs, and listened to her breathing. Anna winced when he reached the left side of her torso. She gasped and tightened her grip on the blanket. "We are checking for trauma related to the impact," the doctor explained. "Your baby's heartbeat is still present. That is good news. But your body is responding to severe stress. We need to monitor you closely." Charles exhaled shakily. Is the baby in danger? There is a risk, the doctor said. Stress of this kind can affect the placenta or trigger complications. She needs rest. She needs calm. Most of all, she needs protection from whatever caused this. Charles did not need to be told twice. The doctor's tone held a firm truth that struck him deeper than any battlefield command ever had. He nodded with a sharp motion and stepped aside as the medical team continued their checks. Anna's eyes fluttered open again. "Dad," she whispered. "He kicked me. He really kicked me." Her voice broke. Tears rolled down the sides of her face and soaked into the pillow beneath her. Charles swallowed hard. He brushed a strand of hair away from her forehead, his movements gentle but filled with a quiet rage. "I saw," he said. "I saw everything." Anna let out a faint sob. "Why did he do that?" "I just wanted answers. I did not want a fight." Charles shook his head. "It does not matter why. It should never have happened." The doctor finished his checks and stepped to the side. "Sir," he said to Charles, "may I speak with you privately?" Charles hesitated, glancing down at Anna, then nodded and followed the doctor into the hallway. The fluorescent lights hummed softly above them. A nurse pushed a supply cart past. For a moment, the world seemed eerily quiet. The doctor folded his hands in front of him. "I have worked in this hospital for over 30 years, he began. "I have seen women come in with injuries they claimed were from accidents, slipping, falling, bumping into furniture. Many of those stories were not true." Charles felt his jaw tighten. The doctor continued, "Your daughter did not get those marks on her arms and legs by falling. The bruising patterns tell a different story, and what happened today could have caused a miscarriage. She was very lucky." The words cut through Charles with brutal clarity. He had noticed the bruises before. He had asked Anna about them. She had always offered an excuse. She had always looked away. "I am telling you this as a medical professional," the doctor said. "She is not safe with whoever did this. If she goes back, it will happen again. And next time, the baby might not survive." Charles stared at the man in silence. His chest rose and fell with controlled anger, the kind he had learned to bury deep during his years in the military. But this was not a battlefield. This was his daughter. This was his grandchild. "Thank you, doctor," he managed to say. The doctor placed a hand on Charles's shoulder. "Protect her. She needs someone who will not look away." Charles nodded slowly. "I will," he said. "I promise." When he returned to the room, Anna was resting. Her breathing had steadied, though her face still showed the lingering pain. Charles pulled a chair close and sat down beside her. He took her hand gently. "Your baby is holding on," he whispered. "She is strong. You are strong too." Anna's lips quivered. "I do not want to go home, Dad. I cannot face him. I cannot pretend anymore." "You will not go back," Charles said firmly. "I will not let you. I won." Anna closed her eyes and let out a shuddering breath, as if the weight of months had fallen off her shoulders. Charles remained seated beside her, his posture rigid, his mind turning through thoughts like pages of a book he did not want to read. He remembered every conversation where she brushed aside his concern, every moment where she smiled too brightly, every bruise she never explained properly. He felt a deep ache settle into his chest, the ache of a man who realized he should have seen more, done more, asked more. He leaned forward and rested his elbows on his knees. The room was dim now. The monitors cast a soft glow against the walls. A nurse walked in quietly to check Anna's vitals, then left without a word. Charles stared at the floor, the tile pattern blurring slightly. He felt the weight of a decision forming in him, a decision that grew heavier with each memory of Graham's cold voice and Anna's trembling hands. He stood up quietly, walked to the hallway, phone mounted on the wall, and dialed a number he had not used in years. The rings echoed like distant footsteps from an old life. A rough voice answered. "Wilson? Been a long time." Charles breathed deeply. "Jonah, I need you." Another voice joined the line. "What happened, Charles?" Mason asked. Charles looked through the small window at his daughter, lying on the hospital bed. "My girl is hurt," he said, "and I will not let it happen again." There was a long silence. Then Jonah spoke. "Tell us when and where." Charles closed his eyes. His voice dropped to a low, steady tone. "Tonight," he said. "We start tonight." The night air over Denver felt colder than usual when Jonah Price parked his truck 2 blocks away from the upscale rooftop restaurant. He turned off the engine and allowed the darkness to settle around him. His instincts sharpened the moment he stepped out and adjusted the collar of his jacket. Years of reconnaissance missions had trained him to blend into shadows without drawing attention. Tonight, his mission was not military. It was personal. Charles had called, and Jonah never ignored a call from a man who once saved his life. He lifted his binoculars and observed the private dining floor through the tall glass panels. The warm glow of pendant lights revealed a familiar silhouette. Graham Blackwell, polished suit, relaxed shoulders, a drink in hand. Across from him sat a woman in a tight red dress, Carmen Reyes. She laughed too loudly, tossing her hair as if she were performing for an invisible audience. Jonah zoomed in. Graham was smiling. Not a single trace of guilt, shame, or restraint touched his face. He leaned back comfortably and gestured with animated confidence. Then Jonah saw something that tightened every muscle in his body. Graham mimicked a kicking motion with his leg as he laughed. Carmen leaned closer and whispered something that made Graham slap the table in amusement. They were joking about the incident at the bank, about Anna, about the child she carried. Jonah lowered the binoculars and exhaled slowly. He had seen cruelty before, but something about this felt especially rotten. Not just a moment of anger, not a flawed man. This was a predator who felt untouchable. He pulled out his phone and recorded several minutes of the scene. When Graham's gestures grew exaggerated, Jonah zoomed in further. Every detail mattered. Every expression mattered. Charles needed to see what kind of man his daughter had married, and Jonah intended to give him the clearest truth possible. Meanwhile, across town, Mason Cade sat in front of 3 monitors that filled his small apartment with a cold blue glow. Mason was a genius with electronics. In the service, he had cracked encrypted systems with a skill that baffled even senior analysts. Now he worked quickly, fingers flying over the keyboard, bypassing the digital walls of Graham's smart home system. "Come on," Mason murmured. "You paid for this fancy setup. Let us see what you hid behind it." A soft chime confirmed access. The screen blinked, and dozens of camera thumbnails appeared. Living room, hallway, kitchen, master bedroom, guest rooms, office. Each camera provided a silent glimpse into the world Graham controlled. Mason clicked through the footage from the previous months. It did not take long before he found what he expected. Graham pacing the living room. Graham shouting. Graham grabbing Anna by the wrist and pulling her across the room. A vase flying against the wall during an argument. Anna flinching. Anna shielding her stomach with her arms. Anna sitting alone on the edge of the bed, shoulders shaking with quiet sobs, while Graham stood at the doorway, yelling at her. Mason's jaw tightened. He felt the familiar fire rising in his chest. He replayed one clip and turned up the volume. "You ever think of leaving me?" Graham said in a cold, measured voice. "And you will lose everything. Do you understand? Everything." Anna's voice trembled. "I just want peace." "You want what I allow you to have," Graham replied. Mason paused the footage and leaned back in his chair. He rubbed his face with both hands. The pieces were forming a shape, and the shape was uglier than anyone had assumed. He opened a folder on his drive and saved the footage. Then he opened another window to search through legal and financial databases, digging into Graham's past. The deeper he looked, the stranger things became. 2 previous marriages, both short, both ending abruptly. Barely any public record of the divorces. No photos, no interviews, no social media posts from the ex-wives after the separation dates. The only hints of their existence were fragments of financial transfers, large sums of money moving to unknown accounts, always during the exact month the relationships ended. Mason frowned and whispered to himself, "You covered your tracks well, but not well enough." He organized everything into a digital folder and named it simply, "For Charles." By the time Jonah returned to Charles's home, the city was wrapped in quiet, midnight calm. He knocked on the door softly, and Charles opened it almost immediately. His eyes looked tired, but his posture remained firm. "Come in," Charles said. Jonah stepped inside and removed his gloves. "You need to see this." They sat at the dining table, and Jonah handed Charles his phone. The recording played silently, showing Graham reenacting the kicking gesture and laughing with Carmen. Charles stared at the screen without blinking. His jaw shifted. His hand tightened around the phone until his knuckles whitened. "He joked about it," Charles whispered. "He joked about hurting her." Jonah nodded. "There is more. Mason is sending the rest." Almost on cue, a soft chime echoed from Charles's laptop. He opened it and saw a message from Mason with the folder attached. He clicked on the first video. The living room confrontation appeared. Graham grabbing Anna, Anna trying to step back, Graham towering over her. The words, the threats, the cruelty. A heavy silence settled over the room as Charles watched every second. He played clip after clip, videos of different nights, recordings of arguments, soft cries, loud shouts, a door slamming, a picture frame crashing to the floor. When the final clip ended, Charles closed the laptop slowly and set his hands flat on the table. He bowed his head for a long moment. Jonah waited, knowing silence was the only respectful response. Finally, Charles lifted his gaze. His eyes were no longer filled with shock or sadness. They were filled with resolve, deep, cold, unshakable. "This is not a man who lost his temper," Charles said. "This is a man who hunts the women he marries. This is a pattern. This is who he is." Jonah nodded. "So what is next?" Charles looked at the closed laptop, then at the window where the night reflected faintly against the glass. "If we hand this to a court," he said calmly, "he will hire lawyers. He will twist the story. He will claim it was stress or misunderstanding. He will walk free." Jonah remained silent. Charles stood slowly. "So we do not give him to the law. We give him to the people." His voice was steady. Final. Absolute. Tonight, Charles Wilson stopped being a grieving father. He became the architect of a reckoning. The next morning arrived with an unusual stillness. Clouds hovered low over Denver, and a pale gray light seeped through the windows of Charles Wilson's study. He sat alone at his desk, the laptop closed in front of him, his fingers pressed together beneath his chin. Every image from the previous night, every sound, every proof of Graham's cruelty replayed in his mind. He had slept only an hour. His thoughts were sharp, cold, and organized. This was no longer about anger. It was strategy. A father's strategy. A knock echoed through the hallway. Charles rose and opened the door to find a man in his 60s standing there. He wore a heavy coat and held a worn leather satchel at his side. "Morning, Charles," the man greeted. "Come in, Walter," Charles replied. Walter Hartman stepped inside. He had been a journalist for over 3 decades. His articles once brought down corrupt bankers and exposed fraudulent charities. He had always been known for fearless reporting and a relentless pursuit of truth. Yet today, he carried an expression of solemn curiosity. Charles had told him only that it was urgent. They moved to the study. Walter set his satchel down and removed his notebook. "What do you need from me?" Walter asked. Charles placed the laptop on the desk, opened it, and clicked a file. The screen filled with footage from Graham's smart home. Graham grabbing Anna. Graham threatening her. Graham's voice dripping with venom as he forced her against the wall. Walter watched without speaking. His breathing slowed. His jaw tightened. When the clip ended, he set his notebook aside. "Tell me that man is in a cell right now," Walter said. "He is not," Charles answered. "He is at home, probably drinking, probably planning how to spin this to his advantage." Walter leaned back. "So you want this public?" "I want this everywhere," Charles said. "Not through the courts, not through the police, through the people." Walter nodded slowly. "You came to the right person, but we will need help." Charles had expected that. He reached for his phone and sent 2 short messages. Within an hour, 2 more journalists arrived. Linda Crow, a seasoned investigative reporter known for exposing corruption in major corporations, and Peter Doyle, a retired news producer with decades of experience shaping national broadcasts. All 3 owed Charles favors from years past. He had helped them during financial downturns, protected sources, and provided resources when no one else would. Now, they were here for him. They gathered around the long wooden table in the study. Linda leaned forward, scanning the documents and video clips Charles had printed. Peter adjusted his glasses and scribbled notes. Walter watched Charles with a measured expression. The look of a man who understood the gravity of what he was about to take part in. Charles cleared his throat. Before we begin, I want this to be clear. I do not want Graham dead. I do not want violence. I want the truth, every piece of it. I want the entire country to see the man he really is. Linda nodded. So we are dealing with a strategy, not revenge. Both, Charles said quietly, but a lawful strategy. No physical harm, only exposure. Peter looked at the footage again. This is more than enough to destroy him publicly. The kicking video alone could crash his entire company. It's totally styes. That video will be our first strike, Charles said. It must be released in a way that captures national attention, especially among older audiences. Walter spoke. We will publish it in a senior readership paper. The ones people still trust. The ones with traditional values. When older Americans see a pregnant woman kicked in a bank lobby, they will not turn away. Linda added, after that, we release the footage from the smart home. Not all at once, piece by piece. A narrative that builds momentum. Domestic abuse, manipulation, repeated incidents. Peter tapped his pen thoughtfully. And the financial records. You said he has hidden accounts. Charles nodded. He has more than that. Mason found questionable transactions, transfers during his 2 previous marriages, money sent to unlisted accounts. We can present this in layers. First, the violence, then the deceit, then the financial misconduct. Walter folded his arms. What about corporate pressure? If the board sees all this, they will panic. Investors will panic. That will hit him harder than any lawsuit. That is part of the plan, Charles said, which is why I have already taken the first step. He stood and walked to a drawer. From inside, he took a folder and placed it on the table. Walter opened it and stared. Stock purchase records, he said. Blackwell Corp. shares. Charles nodded. I bought just enough to give myself access during a crisis. Not enough to raise suspicion. Enough to speak when the board begins to crumble. Linda raised an eyebrow. So you want to be standing at the table when his empire burns. I want to make sure it burns in the right way, Charles replied. Peter looked at him with admiration. You thought this through? Charles sat again. My daughter nearly lost her life. My grandchild is still at risk. I will not rely on hope or luck. I will rely on planning. The room fell silent as each person absorbed the weight of what lay ahead. Walter closed the folder and placed a hand on the USB drive on the table. When this goes live, Walter said, your name will stay off the record, but your fingerprints will be all over the movement it creates. That is fine, Charles said. Let the world focus on him, not me. Linda leaned back in her chair. This is going to be ugly. Graham will retaliate. He has money, connections. He will try to manipulate the story. That is why you 3 are here, Charles answered. He is good at lies. You are better at truth. Peter lifted the USB and held it up to the dim light. Once this hits the morning edition, there is no turning back. Charles met his eyes. I do not want to turn back. Peter nodded, placed the USB gently inside his jacket pocket, and stood. Then, let us begin. Walter and Linda gathered their notes. The 3 journalists headed toward the foyer with steady steps. Charles followed them, his expression firm and unyielding. At the front door, Walter paused. Charles, he said, after tomorrow, the world will know exactly who Graham Blackwell is. Charles looked past him into the cold gray morning. Good, he said. It is time. He watched them walk down the driveway. He closed the door slowly and stood in the quiet house, surrounded by the weight of a plan that would change everything. The war for the truth had begun. The next morning dawned quietly over Denver, but the calm did not last long. By 6:30, the printing presses of one of America's largest senior readership newspapers were rolling at full speed. Thick stacks of papers slid off metal racks, each carrying a front page that would ignite outrage across the entire country. The headline stretched boldly across the top. It read, in large black letters, Millionaire kicks pregnant wife inside bank. Cameras capture everything. Below the headline sat a still frame pulled directly from the bank footage. Graham's leg frozen mid-strike, Anna falling to her knees, the marble floor beneath her, gleaming beneath the cold fluorescent lights. Anyone who glanced at the image understood the violence in an instant. At 7:15, a retired couple in Kansas opened the paper at their kitchen table. The wife covered her mouth. The husband adjusted his glasses and shook his head. He muttered something about how the world had lost its sense of decency. 2 minutes later, a grandmother in Florida read it on her front porch and immediately called her daughter to ask how something so vile could happen in public. By 8 o'clock, readers in Arizona, Montana, Ohio, and Maine had the paper in their hands. Older Americans were the first to see it, and they were the first to react. They shared the story in church groups, community centers, and online forums where seniors gathered to talk about world events. The outrage spread like wildfire. The newspaper's website released the digital version of the article at 8:30. The video clip was embedded directly beneath the headline. When readers clicked it, the footage began without delay. The lobby of Highstone National Bank appeared, bright and busy. The sounds of normal activity filled the background. Then Graham stormed in. His shouts echoed across the speakers. The moment he kicked, Anna played clearly, without obstruction or poor angles. Every viewer could see exactly what had happened. By 9 o'clock, the clip had been shared more than 2 million times. Television producers noticed the trend immediately. At 10 sharp, a daytime talk show hosted by two women in their 60s devoted an entire segment to the video. The hosts shook their heads as the clip played behind them. One of the women said she had never seen something so cruel captured with such clarity. Calls flooded into the show from viewers who demanded accountability. Churches, senior groups, and women's shelters echoed the same sentiment. The moral standards of older generations clashed violently with the brutality displayed in the footage. They had lived long enough to know what family should mean. They knew what protection of life meant, and they could not tolerate what they had seen. By lunchtime, the story dominated the news cycle. National talk shows replayed the video every hour. Commentators argued on panels. Some focused on the cruelty of the act, others focused on the pattern of emotional manipulation visible in Anna's body language. Experts in domestic violence appeared on screens across the country to explain how common these situations were and how often pregnant women were left unprotected. Their voices added depth and urgency. The nation listened. The hashtag, created by an elderly social worker in Oregon, began trending within 30 minutes. It read simply, "Justice for Anna." Soon it appeared everywhere. Senior citizens posted heartfelt messages. Younger people shared the clip with fury. Women related stories of their own suffering. The country rallied emotionally around a woman they had never met, united by a simple truth: no one deserved what had been done to her. By early afternoon, the effect reached the business world. Investors began calling Blackwell Corp headquarters. Some demanded explanations, others threatened to pull out of upcoming deals. Corporate partners expressed concern about public relations damage. A luxury brand that had hired Graham for an advertisement quietly removed his image from its website. The pressure built hour by hour. Inside Blackwell Corp, executives scrambled to create a plan. They drafted statements. They argued about messaging. They tried to convince themselves that the storm would pass. It did not. Meanwhile, inside his lavish Denver mansion, Graham finally saw the headline for himself. It was 2:30 in the afternoon when he walked into his living room with a cup of coffee, still in his robe. He turned on the television, expecting stock reports and political commentary. Instead, he saw himself. Not a flattering interview, not a curated appearance, but the moment he kicked Anna, frozen in time on a national broadcast. "What is this?" he muttered. He stepped closer. The video played in full. His own voice echoed back at him, his anger, his arrogance, his violence. He stared at the screen with disbelief. As the clip replayed, the host of the program called his actions shocking and inexcusable. Another commentator compared the scene to a moment from a crime documentary. A third said she feared for Anna's safety. Graham's grip tightened around the cup. His jaw twitched. His face turned red. "No," he said. "No. This is not happening." He switched channels. The same headline. He switched again. Another replay of the video. Another panel of experts condemning him. He tried a news network known for business coverage. They were discussing the stock drop of Blackwell Corp and how investor confidence had plummeted. "What are they doing?" Graham growled. "What are they trying to pull?" He grabbed the remote and turned the television off. The silence in the room lasted 3 seconds. Then he slammed the remote onto the marble coffee table. The impact echoed through the house. He turned the television back on and saw another story. A retired judge expressing disgust, a pastor calling the act a moral disgrace, a well-known radio host urging listeners to boycott any company associated with Graham Blackwell. The fury inside him boiled over. With a roar, Graham stepped toward the television and smashed his coffee cup against the screen. Glass shattered. Liquid splashed across the floor. The image flickered and disappeared. The room darkened, except for the faint winter light filtering in through the tall windows. Graham stood there, breathing heavily, chest rising and falling with each violent breath. He clenched his fists and stared at the broken screen. "If they want a media war," he said through gritted teeth, "they will get one." Outside, the world continued to turn against him. The first strike had landed, and the nation had chosen its side. Anna's, lease provider, lease problem, lease provider. The morning after the video shook the nation, the hospital hallways seemed unusually bright. Nurses moved quickly between rooms, and the soft beeping of machines echoed in the distance. Anna sat upright in her hospital bed, her hands folded gently over her abdomen. The pain from the previous day still lingered, a deep ache that pulsed whenever she shifted her weight. A nurse entered to check her vitals and smiled politely, but Anna sensed hesitation in her eyes. "You are still showing signs of internal stress," the nurse said softly. "The doctor would like to keep you one more night if possible." Anna shook her head. "I want to go home. I cannot stay here. I cannot lie in this bed waiting for him to control the story." The nurse hesitated again. "You need special monitoring. Leaving today means you must use a wheelchair, and you must promise to return immediately if anything changes." "I promise," Anna said. Her voice was gentle but firm. When the doctor entered, he repeated the same warnings. "Your body is still reacting to trauma. Your baby is stable, but this stability is fragile. If you must leave, then you do so in a wheelchair, under the supervision of your father." "I understand," Anna said. "Please let me go." The doctor nodded reluctantly and signed the release forms. An hour later, Anna sat in a hospital wheelchair while Charles gathered her discharge papers. She wore a thick sweater to stay warm as a cold breeze swept through the sliding doors. A nurse wheeled her outside, where Jonah waited by the car. Charles opened the passenger door carefully and helped Anna shift from the wheelchair onto the seat. "You sure you can do this?" Charles asked quietly. Anna looked at him with steady eyes. "I need to. If Graham wants to twist the truth, then I need to face him in the right way. On my terms, not his." Charles nodded. Her strength reminded him so much of her late mother that it made his chest ache. They drove toward Graham's mansion in silence. The estate loomed over the hillside like a monument built for someone who believed he could not be touched. Tall brick walls, iron gates, a sprawling lawn meticulously groomed. It looked pristine, but beneath that exterior lay secrets that were about to be exposed. Jonah and Mason arrived earlier to set up the equipment. Mason tapped into the mansion's Wi-Fi system to disable Graham's security cameras. Jonah positioned small, high-definition cameras in the living room, behind decorative vases and inside a bookshelf. Their movements were quiet and efficient. They had done this kind of work in far more dangerous places. By the time Charles's car stopped at the entrance, everything was ready. Charles helped Anna to the front door. She leaned on him slightly, taking slow breaths as her body protested the movement. Her baby shifted gently under her palm, reminding her why she had chosen to be here. Graham opened the door before they knocked. His expression was carefully composed, almost theatrical. He wore a dark suit, and his hair was neatly styled. The moment he saw Anna, he lifted his brows with exaggerated sympathy. "Anna," he said, "you look unwell. I wish you had stayed in the hospital, but I am glad you came. We need to talk." Anna said nothing. She simply walked past him. her posture straight, her steps steady. Charles followed close behind, keeping one eye on Graham at all times. Graham closed the door. "The media is out of control," he said as he walked into the living room. "They made the video look worse than it was. We need to fix this together." Charles stood behind Anna. "She is not here for a performance," he said calmly. "She is here to listen." Graham ignored him. He sat on the edge of the couch and patted the cushion beside him. "Anna, sit. Let me explain." Anna remained standing. "Explain what?" she asked. "The kick, the screaming, the way you laughed about it last night." Graham's face hardened for a moment before he forced it back into a sympathetic mask. "Sweetheart, you know I was under pressure. I said things I regret. We can move past them. The public just needs to see us together. They need to see a united family." He reached for her wrist. Anna stepped back, but not fast enough. Graham grabbed her hand tightly. His fingers dug into her skin, pressing hard until she winced. "You will sit down," he hissed quietly. "You will help me fix this. You owe me that." Anna let out a small cry. Charles took one step forward, but Anna lifted her free hand to stop him. She needed Graham to show his real self. Graham tightened his grip even more. "This is all your fault," he snapped. "You embarrassed me. You ruined everything. You think I will let you walk away and destroy me. You are delusional." His voice grew louder. His face flushed red with anger. He released her, only to slam his fist onto the coffee table, rattling the glasses arranged neatly on it. Anna flinched. "What did you think would happen?" he said. "That you could run to your father and hide. That you could betray me and expect mercy. I made you. I gave you everything." Charles's jaw tightened. His hands curled at his sides, but he remained still. The cameras needed every second of this. Graham continued pacing. "You will apologize publicly. You will say the video was misunderstood. You will sit beside me and say you forgave me, or you will regret it for the rest of your life." He turned toward Anna again. "Do you hear me?" Anna looked at him, her breath shallow from the stress. "I hear you," she said softly. "The whole world will hear you too." Graham blinked. "What is that supposed to mean?" "Two, in the read." Before Anna could answer, Charles stepped forward. His voice was steady and cold. "It means thank you, Graham." Graham stared at him. "For what?" Charles met his eyes with quiet intensity. "For giving us the best interview of your life." Graham froze. His expression shifted from confusion to dread as he scanned the room. Suddenly aware of the unnatural silence, his gaze moved across the bookshelf, the vases, the painting on the wall. "You filmed this," he whispered. Anna stood taller despite the pain in her side. "No," she said. "You filmed yourself. We just let you speak." Graham's face drained of color. The trap had sprung, and every word he said had been captured. The storm that Charles had planned moved into its second phase with precise timing. By the next morning, the nation had already spent 24 hours reeling from the first wave of outrage. News anchors continued to replay the bank footage. Commentators repeated the same phrases: shocking, unacceptable, brutal. People across the country were still discussing the moment Graham kicked his pregnant wife. The entire nation had become familiar with Graham's face, and none of that familiarity brought sympathy. Yet Charles, Jonah, Mason, and the three veteran journalists knew the story had not reached its peak. What had been released was only the beginning. The next step would not just expose Graham's cruelty, it would destroy any illusion he attempted to create. In a small production office arranged inside Walter's home studio, computers hummed while screens glowed with folders of raw footage. Jonah had transferred every clip from the cameras he and Mason had hidden inside Graham's mansion. The files showed Graham shouting, pacing, grabbing Anna's wrist, slamming his fist on the table, and unleashing his fury without restraint. Mason edited each moment carefully. Every sound was clear, every gesture was visible, every expression of contempt carved itself into the viewer's memory. Linda sat across from him with a notepad. "The idea," she said, "is to build a direct confrontation between his lie and the truth. His apology on one side of the screen, his real behavior on the other." Peter nodded from behind his laptop. "We will frame it as a segment titled, 'Behind the Apology.'" People love a reveal. They love to see the truth break through the mask. Walter added, and we make sure it airs on the platform that older generations watch most. The outrage will multiply. Charles listened to them quietly. He had no desire to savor vengeance. He was focused solely on the precision of the operation. Every step had to be perfect. Every release had to strike the public like a hammer on steel. By late afternoon, the team completed the primary edit. The video opened with Graham's polished, rehearsed apology. He sat in front of a soft background, wearing a neat sweater and speaking with forced sincerity. He claimed regret. He blamed stress. He said he was seeking help. He said he wanted healing. Then the screen split in half. On the right side appeared the new footage. Graham grabbing Anna's wrist violently. Graham shouting into her face. Graham calling her pathetic. Graham striking the table so hard that the glasses rattled. His eyes filled not with remorse, but with fury. The contrast between the two sides of the screen was undeniable. On one side, a carefully shaped lie. On the other, raw and unfiltered truth. Linda watched the completed segment and whispered, "This will break him." Peter said, "This will break his whole world." The live stream was scheduled for 7 p.m., a time chosen deliberately because it attracted both older viewers and families who gathered after dinner. The title card displayed only the words, "Behind the Apology." No sensational graphics, no dramatic music, just clean presentation. The truth, as Charles wanted it, needed no embellishment. Across the country, notifications appeared on screens. Thousands clicked, then tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands. The viewer count rose steadily, climbing like a tide that refused to stop. The broadcast opened, with Walter speaking directly to the camera. "Last night," he said, "the nation saw footage that disturbed us deeply. Today we present information that offers greater context. What you are about to see speaks for itself." He stepped aside as the main segment began. The apology clip played first. Viewers watched Graham's calculated expressions and polished mannerisms. In the chat window, people typed comments quickly. Some expressed confusion. Others questioned his sincerity. A few wondered whether he deserved sympathy. Then the screen divided. On the right, Graham's rage erupted. The footage from the mansion played clearly. His voice filled the speakers. His insults echoed. His hand tightened around Anna's wrist. His threats landed like blows. The live comments exploded instantly. "Unbelievable. He lied to all of us. This is who he really is. He grabbed her like that while she was pregnant. This is abuse. This is evil." The viewer count doubled, then tripled. Churches streamed the broadcast for evening meetings. Senior groups shared the link in group chats. Advocates for abused women reposted the segment with captions expressing horror and heartbreak. A national columnist tweeted, "There is no apology that can erase this level of cruelty." The reaction overwhelmed the platform. Sponsors and corporate partners responded immediately. Emails flooded Blackwell Corp within minutes. Several brands released public statements saying they were terminating relationships with Graham. A charity where Graham had served as a featured speaker removed his picture from their website. In an office tower downtown, executives at Blackwell Corp gathered around screens showing the live stream. They watched as the comments rolled in and as the truth became impossible to ignore. One executive placed a hand over his mouth. Another swore under his breath. Someone whispered, "This is a disaster." Meanwhile, in living rooms across America, elderly couples shook their heads in disbelief. They had grown up with strict values about marriage, loyalty, and responsibility. Seeing a man harm his pregnant wife openly and then lie about it offended them on a deeply personal level. They made phone calls, they wrote emails, they signed petitions demanding consequences. The effect on the financial market was immediate. The following morning's opening bell was still hours away. Yet, after hours, trading reports reflected the public sentiment. Shares of Blackwell Corp dropped rapidly. Analysts predicted severe long-term damage. Back in Walter's studio, the team watched the reaction unfold in real time. Charles sat in his chair without speaking. The shadows on his face made him look older, but also stronger. He did not smile. He did not celebrate. He simply observed. Linda placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did the right thing," she said quietly. Charles did not answer. His eyes stayed on the screen, watching the live stream counter climb higher with every passing second. As the broadcast ended, Walter returned to the camera. "This," he said, "is only the beginning of the full story." Across the city, in a skyscraper office, the board of Blackwell Corp held an emergency meeting. They surrounded a large screen that displayed the plummeting stock chart. Red filled every corner. Panic mixed with desperation. "This is catastrophic," one member said. Another replied, "If we do not act now, the whole company goes down." Another sprays. A third leaned back in his chair and spoke the words no one wanted to say, but everyone felt. "Either we remove him, or we fall with him." The room fell silent. The choice had become unavoidable, and the world outside continued to roar with anger. The morning after the live stream felt heavier than any morning the city of Denver had seen in years. The sidewalks outside the Blackwell Corp headquarters filled with reporters before the sun even rose above the skyline. Their breath turned into white clouds in the cold air as they waited with cameras and microphones pointed toward the building. Screens behind them displayed sinking stock numbers in bold red. Commentators spoke in urgent voices about a crisis that seemed to worsen each hour. The fall of Graham Blackwell had become a national event. Inside the tower, the atmosphere felt even colder. Executives rushed through the lobby, clutching tablets and stacks of emergency reports. Phones rang without pause. Assistants whispered about calls from investors who wanted answers, accountability, or immediate withdrawal from all dealings with the company. The elevators carried tense employees to the upper floors, where the boardroom lights glowed long before the usual workday began. On the 30th floor, the members of the board sat at a long, polished table. Their expressions ranged from weary to furious. Several had dark circles under their eyes, evidence that they had spent most of the night in conference calls and damage control meetings. A large monitor on the wall displayed the collapsing stock chart. The red line seemed to fall endlessly, like a cliff with no bottom. "This is unsustainable," one director said. "Our value dropped almost 40% in 18 hours. If this continues, we lose our institutional partners." Another director tapped his pen repeatedly. "Public trust is gone. Every hour more sponsors walk away. We are bleeding out. We need action." A third director looked toward the door. He should be here by now. But Graham was not there. He had been unreachable since the live stream. His phone went to voicemail. His assistant did not know where he was. Rumors moved through the building like whispers carried by wind. Some said he was hiding at one of his private properties. Others said he was preparing a statement. No one truly knew. The boardroom doors opened suddenly. The room fell silent. Charles Wilson stepped inside. He wore a simple dark coat and carried a neat folder tucked under his arm. His expression was calm but firm, a contrast to the frantic energy of the room. He walked to the table with steady steps. Several board members recognized him from background research that had begun circulating early that morning. A few exchanged glances. They knew he had recently purchased scattered portions of company stock, small pieces from different funds, enough to make him a meaningful shareholder. The chairman cleared his throat. "Mr. Wilson, we were not expecting you in person." "I imagine you were not," Charles replied. "But we are in a crisis that requires clarity. I am here because I believe clarity must start now." He placed his folder on the table and opened it. The first page contained printed screenshots from the live stream. One side showed Graham pretending to apologize with a calm face. The other side showed him grabbing Anna's wrist and shouting. Charles slid the images across the table. Several board members leaned forward immediately, their brows tightening as they recognized the severity of what they were seeing. "This," Charles said slowly, "is the man who leads your company." A director exhaled sharply. "We know what the public is saying, but we do not have confirmation about the extent of the damage he caused inside his home." Charles nodded once. He turned the page and revealed detailed financial summaries. "This is not only personal misconduct, it is financial misconduct. Hidden accounts, suspicious transfers during his previous marriages, transactions that show a pattern that is unacceptable for any corporate leader." I have the full documentation available. He handed the folder to the chairman, who began flipping through it with widening eyes. The other board members waited tensely. Charles continued. The live stream exposed his violence. It also exposed his dishonesty. Millions watched his behavior. Millions heard his threats. This company cannot survive if it stays tied to him. Investors know it. The public knows it. Your employees know it. A silence settled over the room. It felt heavy, almost suffocating. Charles placed both hands on the table. I did not come here to take control. I came here because this company is on the edge of collapse. You have one chance to salvage what is left, and that chance begins with removing Graham from every position he holds. A director spoke quietly. If we remove him, we face legal retaliation. Another replied, if we keep him, we face bankruptcy. It's improved. Someone at the end of the table whispered, what choice do we really have? The chairman looked at every person seated before him. His voice was soft but certain. We vote. Now. He pressed a button. A digital ballot appeared on the monitor. 11 names lit up, each representing a voting director. Next to each name was a simple choice. Remove, keep. The first vote appeared. Remove. The second. Remove. The third. Remove. 7 more votes followed. All the same. The decision was unanimous. The chairman turned to Charles. Mr. Wilson, your concerns have been heard. Graham Blackwell is removed from all executive roles effective immediately. His access to company accounts, projects, communications, and properties is terminated. Charles nodded respectfully. Thank you. It was necessary. Security officers were called to escort Graham if he arrived. As if on cue, the elevator bell chimed. The board members tensed. Graham entered the room with a forced smile, dressed in a tailored suit as if prepared for a press conference. His smile vanished when he saw security waiting by the door. He looked toward the table and noticed the open folder, the paused live stream images, and the director's grim faces. What is this? He demanded. Some kind of joke? The chairman stood. Graham, your actions have caused catastrophic damage. The board has voted unanimously to remove you. You cannot do that, Graham said. I built this company. You destroyed its future, a director replied. 2 security officers stepped beside Graham. He tried to pull away, but their grip tightened. They guided him toward the hallway. He turned back toward the room, shouting at the top of his lungs. You will need me one day. All of you will crawl back to me. No one responded. Cameras clicked outside the conference room. The hallway filled with flashes as Graham was escorted toward the elevator. Reporters shouted his name. Employees watched with disbelief. The building that once displayed his success now witnessed his downfall. Inside the boardroom, Charles watched quietly. He felt no triumph, only a steady resolve. The corporate coup was complete, and Graham Blackwell had lost the world he tried so desperately to control. The night after the board removed Graham from Blackwell Corp carried a strange, hollow quiet. Denver seemed to breathe differently, as if the city itself had stepped back from him. The streetlights glowed over empty sidewalks. The wind pressed gently against the windows of his penthouse, but inside, the silence felt like a punishment. The world that once praised him had turned away. His phone sat on the table, lit with hundreds of unread messages. Most were from reporters demanding comments. Others came from strangers, sending words far sharper. Graham walked through the penthouse slowly. His reflection moved beside him in the tall windows. His face looked older, drawn, and strangely unfamiliar. He sank into a chair but rose again a moment later, unable to sit still. He tried to steady his breathing, but his chest shook with each inhale. The weight of humiliation pressed down on him. For years he had believed he stood above everyone. Now he felt he was sinking beneath them all. On the table lay several newspapers he had thrown earlier. Their headlines stared up at him. Each one printed images from the live stream, his apology on one side, his rage on the other. One article quoted a well-known pastor who called him a man who has lost his soul. Another paper interviewed experts in domestic abuse. They described his behavior as calculated, dangerous, and deeply rooted in control. Opinion pieces from senior journalists filled the pages with words like shame, cruelty, and cowardice. He crumpled one newspaper and threw it across the room. The page fluttered to the floor like a fallen leaf. He turned on the television, hoping for a distraction. Instead, every channel replayed the same footage, his own voice shouting, his hand gripping Anna's wrist, his face twisted with anger. Commentators shook their heads. A psychologist broke down his behavior as a pattern of aggression. A well-known senior talk show host called him a threat to any woman who crossed his path. Graham lunged forward and shut the television off. The silence returned. It felt heavier. He poured himself a drink and swallowed it too quickly. The burn in his throat did nothing to ease the ache inside him. He poured another, then another, but the bitterness only felt sharper. His phone vibrated. He grabbed it with trembling fingers. A message from an old partner read, "We are cutting ties effective immediately." Another, from a close business friend, said, "You lied to us all. Please do not contact me again." Several messages came from employees he once trusted. Their words were colder. They spoke of disappointment, betrayal, disgust. His grip tightened around the phone until his knuckles whitened. He threw it across the room. It struck the wall and fell to the floor with a dull thud. He paced again, speaking to no one. "They do not understand. They never saw what I carried. They never knew the pressure. They never cared." His voice cracked. He pressed both hands against his face. For a moment he tried to breathe, but his chest tightened again. His thoughts spun wildly. Pieces of the world he had built for himself seemed to fall away, one after another. His job, his reputation, his company, his image, all gone in hours. By midnight, the online world had turned entirely against him. Thousands of comments filled social platforms. People from every state condemned him. Survivors of abuse called him a warning sign. Older Americans who had followed the live stream expressed disbelief that someone so polished could hide such cruelty. Videos analyzing his behavior gained millions of views. Some described him as dangerous. Others called him unworthy of forgiveness. He tried to respond once. He wrote a short message on one platform, claiming everything had been exaggerated. The comments flooded instantly. People rejected his explanation. They accused him of lying. They posted clips proving he had been violent long before the incident at the bank. He deleted the post. He stared at the blank screen for several minutes. His hands trembled. He walked to the balcony and opened the glass door. Cold air rushed into the room. It brushed against his face and made him shiver, but he welcomed the sensation. It grounded him in a way nothing else did. Below, the city lights stretched across the horizon like scattered stars. Cars moved slowly through the streets. The world felt distant, quiet, unreachable. He leaned against the balcony railing. His thoughts drifted to his previous marriages, the quiet settlements, the transactions he believed no one would ever uncover. He realized now how naive he had been to think secrets could stay buried forever. The live stream had opened them all. His knees weakened. He caught himself on the railing. His breath shook in the cold air. He whispered, "It was supposed to be different. I was supposed to be untouchable." But the night offered no answer. He pushed himself away from the balcony and walked back inside. His eyes landed on an old photograph framed on the shelf. It showed him at the opening ceremony of Blackwell Corp's headquarters. Reporters surrounded him. Investors clapped. His smile in the picture was confident, bright, full of certainty. He lifted the frame, stared at it, then set it face down. The emptiness in the penthouse felt louder. He needed air. He needed space. He grabbed his coat and walked out the door. He drove aimlessly through the city. The roads were quiet. Streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement. His mind wandered in circles. He talked to himself without realizing it. Sometimes he apologized to no one. Sometimes he cursed at voices only he could hear. The world outside the windshield blurred. He did not know how long he drove. Eventually, he found himself on a highway bridge overlooking a dark stretch of water. He stopped the car on the shoulder. The engine ticked softly in the cold night. He stepped out slowly. The wind pushed against him. He walked toward the railing. The water below moved gently, reflecting the faint glow of the moon. His thoughts grew quiet. Too quiet For the first time in his life, Graham Blackwell felt truly alone. No company, no audience, no supporters, no future. He placed both hands on the cold metal railing. His breath formed small clouds in the air. "This is all I have left," he whispered. The wind carried the words away. He closed his eyes, and he stepped forward. The night swallowed him without a sound. The morning light arrived gently over Denver, settling across rooftops and quiet streets. It was the kind of light that usually promised a peaceful day. Yet, this morning carried a strange heaviness. Radios in kitchens hummed with breaking news. Television anchors spoke with softened voices. Online headlines displayed the same short phrase, "Graham Blackwell is gone." None of the reports gave details. They did not describe the bridge. They did not mention the water. They simply said that he was no longer alive and that his departure marked the end of a national firestorm. On a senior morning news program, the host spoke carefully while holding a stack of papers. "This is a difficult moment," she said. "No one wished for this ending, but many understand why it happened. The consequences of one man's actions have come full circle." Her co-host nodded, eyes solemn. They shifted the conversation toward compassion for victims of domestic abuse and the importance of listening to their voices. They did not show images of Graham. They did not replay the live stream. They let silence fill the space. Across the city, people reacted quietly. Some shook their heads. Others folded newspapers and set them aside. Families gathered around breakfast tables without speaking much. In community centers for older adults, conversations turned reflective. A retired schoolteacher said softly, "A fall like that leaves no winners." A pastor replied, "Sometimes the storm ends only when the one who caused it disappears." No one raised their voice. The anger that had swept across the country only days earlier faded into a muted, contemplative hush. Inside Charles Wilson's home, the atmosphere felt calmer than it had in weeks. The living room was dim but warm, lit only by the soft glow of morning light passing through sheer curtains. Anna lay on the sofa, wrapped in a thick blanket. A small pillow supported her back. Her hair fell loosely around her shoulders as she rested her hands gently on her belly. The baby moved beneath her touch. For the first time in months, she felt the motion without fear tightening around her chest. She inhaled deeply. The breath came smoothly. Her eyes closed for a moment as relief washed over her. The quiet inside the house felt different now. It was the quiet of safety, the quiet of survival. She whispered to herself, "We are safe now." The words settled into the air like a prayer. In the corner of the room, a small television rested on a wooden cabinet. It was turned off. Charles had decided no screens would play inside the house today. No headlines, no discussions, no footage. The world outside could talk about Graham's final moments. Inside these walls, they chose silence. Charles stood near the window with his hands behind his back. The morning sunlight touched his face gently, outlining the faint lines of worry that had accumulated over the last few months. He had barely slept, yet he felt strangely awake. His gaze rested on the front yard, where light wind brushed through the branches of the old oak tree. He did not think about victory. He did not think about revenge. He thought only of his daughter resting safely a few feet away. He remembered the sleepless nights, the hospital room filled with machines, the fear that she would break under the strain of everything she had endured. Now she was here, alive, breathing, healing. That was enough. He turned from the window and looked at Anna. She met his eyes and offered a small, tired smile. It was not a smile of joy. It was a smile of release. "Do you need anything?" Charles asked. "Just quiet," she replied softly. "Just this." He nodded. He understood. He moved a chair closer to her and sat quietly, allowing the silence to rest between them like a gentle blanket. Across the country, morning news specials shifted from outrage to reflection. A guest psychologist spoke on a major network, explaining how unchecked power can distort a person's mind. A historian discussed figures from the past whose moral collapse resembled Graham's downfall. Commentators spoke of lessons families could take from this tragedy. None of them tried to excuse him. They simply explained him, as if trying to make sense of the broken pieces he left behind. On a well-respected senior editorial site, a columnist posted an article that quickly spread. It read, "In the end, the woman he tried to break survived, and he did not." The words rippled through communities of older readers. Many said it captured what they could not express themselves. Not triumph, not celebration, only truth. As the day warmed, Anna slowly sat up and placed both feet on the floor. She stood with care, holding the blanket around her shoulders. She walked toward the back door and stepped outside. The sun touched her face. The air felt crisp and clean. She closed her eyes and lifted her face toward the light. In the quiet of the backyard, the world felt open again. She pressed one hand against her belly and whispered, "You will grow in a world that is safe. You will know peace. You will not be born into fear." The breeze carried her words gently across the yard. Behind her, the door opened softly. Charles walked out and stood beside her. He did not speak. He simply placed one hand on her shoulder. The warmth of his touch anchored her. Together, they looked across the yard, toward the sunlight that spilled over the grass in soft golden sheets. For a long moment, they stood without speaking. Nothing needed to be said. The storm was over. The destruction had passed. Their family had survived the darkest part of their lives. Anna inhaled deeply again. The air felt lighter. Her heartbeat steadied. Her thoughts settled. A single tear slid down her cheek, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming sense of quiet returning to her life. Charles squeezed her shoulder gently. She looked at him and whispered, "It is over." He nodded. "Yes, finally." The breeze moved through the trees again, lifting the leaves with a soft rustle. It felt like a reminder that life continues even after great storms. Not through dramatic triumphs, but through stillness, returning to the spaces where fear once lived. The sun rose higher, illuminating the yard with soft warmth, and the final truth lingered quietly in the air. When the one who created the darkness disappears, the light does not need to win. It simply needs to return.